My name is David, and I'm 44 years old. I've been a long-haul trucker in the United States for over 20 years. I've driven every major highway from coast to coast, from the sun-baked deserts of Arizona to the frozen interstates of Montana. I thought I'd seen everything these roads had to offer, from terrible accidents to dangerous weather conditions. But what happened to me on Interstate 70 through Kansas in September 2019 taught me that some highways hold mysteries that logic can't explain. There are things that can't be explained. What I experienced that night changed everything. That night, I was hauling electronics from Denver to St. Louis. I'd taken I-70, a route I'd driven hundreds of times. It's a long, straight highway through the heart of America, crossing endless plains where you can see for miles in every direction. I'd left Denver late due to a loading delay, so I was driving through the night to make up time. It was around 2 in the morning when I was crossing the emptiest part of Kansas. The highway was almost deserted, as you'd expect at that hour. Just me, my rig, and the occasional car passing in the opposite direction. The plains stretched out dark and flat on both sides, with only the stars above providing any sense of scale. That's when I saw her. A woman, standing on the shoulder, arm raised, trying to flag me down. She was wearing a white dress that seemed to glow in my headlights. She was in the middle of nowhere. No vehicle visible, no buildings, nothing. Just endless prairie and that lone figure in white. Every instinct told me to keep driving. 2 in the morning, middle of nowhere, lone woman asking for help. It's the setup for either a crime or something worse. But I'm also a father with daughters of my own. The thought of leaving someone stranded out there, possibly in danger, ate at my conscience. I slowed down, fighting with myself. I watched her in my mirrors as my truck rolled past. She stood there, arms still raised, watching my taillights fade. I cursed under my breath and hit the brakes. I put on my hazards and backed up slowly until I was level with her. I rolled down my window just enough to talk. Had to be careful. I asked her what she needed, if she was okay, if she'd had an accident. She approached the window. Her features were hard to make out in the darkness, but I remember she had long, dark hair and very pale skin. The white dress looked old-fashioned, like something from decades ago. She told me in a soft voice that her car had broken down miles back, that she needed to get to the next town to call for help. Something about her voice made me nervous. It was too calm, too soft for someone who'd supposedly been waiting for help in the middle of the night on a deserted highway. But I agreed to give her a ride. I told her to get in, that I'd take her to the next town, which was Salina, about 40 miles ahead. She climbed into the passenger seat without another word, closed the door quietly, and sat there, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. She didn't have a purse, no phone in her hand, nothing, just that white dress, which now, in the cab light, I could see was impossibly clean. Too clean for someone who'd been stranded on a highway. I pulled back onto the road and continued east. I tried making conversation, asking her name, what had happened to her car, if she wanted me to call someone for her, but her answers were brief, almost monosyllabic. Yes, no, thank you. Her voice remained strangely calm. After a few minutes, I gave up trying to chat and focused on the road. The empty Kansas highway required attention, and I could feel her presence beside me, could hear her breathing, slow and steady. That's when I noticed something wrong. The rearview mirror. I could see the reflection of my cab interior. I could see myself driving. I could see the empty sleeper berth behind me, but I couldn't see the woman sitting in the passenger seat. The seat mirrored completely empty. My heart started racing. I glanced at her sideways. She was still there, sitting, looking forward. But in the mirror, when I dared to look again, that seat was empty. I checked my side mirrors. Same thing. No reflection of her. I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was the lighting, the angle of the mirrors, my tiredness playing tricks. But then she spoke. "We're close now," she said.
Her voice sounded different, hollower, like it was coming from far away. I asked her, close to what? The town? She didn't answer, just kept staring ahead. And then the temperature in the cab dropped dramatically. I could see my breath forming clouds. The heater was on full blast, but the cold was intense, unnatural. I looked at her again, and my blood ran cold. Her skin, which had seemed pale before, was now completely white, almost gray. And her eyes, when she turned her head to look at me, were completely black. No whites, no visible pupils, just two dark voids. I hit the gas instinctively, wanting to get to town as fast as possible, but she reached out her hand, a hand that I now saw had long, dark nails, and placed it on my arm. Her touch was freezing, like ice burning through my sleeve. "Here," she said in that hollow voice. I looked ahead and saw a sharp curve approaching, one of those dangerous curves marked with yellow warning signs and decreased speed limits. This is where I died 25 years ago. My boyfriend was driving. We were fighting. He lost control. We went off the road. If you're enjoying this, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like these, and tell me in the comments what story you want to hear next. I tried to brake, but the pedal felt soft, unresponsive. The truck kept accelerating toward that curve. She kept her hand on my arm, her freezing touch partially paralyzing me. "Come with me," she whispered. "Everyone who picks me up ends up coming with me." With a superhuman effort, I wrenched the wheel hard, aiming for the shoulder on the inside of the curve rather than the outside where the drop-off was. The truck skidded, tires screaming, and I felt the impact as I hit the guardrail. But I managed to stop before flipping or going over. When the truck finally came to rest, I looked at the passenger seat. It was empty, completely empty. The door was still locked from the inside. No way she could have gotten out. She'd simply vanished. I climbed out of the cab, shaking, my heart pounding. I checked the damage. The front end was dented and scraped, but nothing major. I could drive. But on my arm, where she'd touched me, there were marks, bruises in the shape of fingers, as if someone had grabbed me with freezing force. I didn't continue that night. I drove slowly to Salina and checked into the first motel I found. I needed to process what had happened. The next morning, I talked to the motel clerk, an elderly man who'd lived in the area his whole life. When I described the woman in white and mentioned the curve where I nearly lost control, his face got serious. He told me the story that everyone in the region knows. 25 years ago, a young couple died at that exact curve. They'd been fighting while driving. The boyfriend lost control, went off the road. The woman was wearing a white dress. They were heading to a party. Since then, he said, several truckers and drivers have reported seeing a woman in white asking for rides in that area. Some say they picked her up and she vanished mysteriously. Others that they nearly had accidents right at that fatal curve. Locals know never to stop if they see anyone on that stretch of highway, especially at night. That was the last hitchhiker I ever picked up. Now, no matter who's standing on the side of the road, no matter how much they seem to need help, I don't stop. Because I learned that not everyone asking for help on the highway is alive, and not everyone wants to be saved. Some just want company in their eternal tragedy. But David's experience isn't the only disturbing highway encounter I've heard about. In fact, I recently met Sarah, a 35-year-old delivery driver who works for a major shipping company based in Texas. What happened to her on Interstate 10 between San Antonio and Houston shows that sometimes the real danger isn't in picking up passengers on the roadside, but in checking who's already in your vehicle. Sarah has been working as a delivery driver for 7 years. It's a job she enjoys because it gives her independence, she can work her own hours, and she likes the solitude of long drives across Texas highways. She often takes overnight routes because they pay better and the roads are less congested. In January 2020, Sarah was assigned a delivery run from San Antonio to Houston, a route she'd driven dozens of times. The pickup was scheduled for 10 p.m., with delivery expected by 6 the next morning. It was a straightforward run on I-10, about 3 hours of driving. She loaded her van and hit the road around 10:30. The highway was relatively quiet for a weeknight. Traffic was light, weather was clear, perfect conditions for making good time. Sarah put on a podcast and settled in for the drive. About an hour into the trip, somewhere between Seguin and Columbus, Sarah glanced in her rearview mirror to check her load. That's when she saw it. A figure sitting in the back of her van. Among the packages, barely visible in the dim light from the highway, was someone, or something. Sarah's heart nearly stopped. She swerved slightly, then corrected herself. She looked in the mirror again. There was definitely someone back there, a dark shape sitting completely still among the boxes. She immediately thought it was a person who'd hidden in her van, maybe trying to illegally cross borders or rob her when she stopped. She gripped the wheel tighter and looked for the next exit with lights, with people, with help. But then she looked directly back through the partition that separated the driver's area from the cargo space. In the direct view, illuminated by occasional passing headlights, she could see her packages clearly. There was no one there. The cargo area was empty except for boxes. She looked back at the rearview mirror. In the reflection, the figure was still there, sitting among the packages, completely motionless. She could make out what looked like the shape of a person, but the features were blurred, indistinct, like a photograph out of focus. Sarah's hands started shaking. She didn't understand what she was seeing. In the mirror, someone was clearly in her van, but when she looked directly, no one was there. She tried adjusting the mirror, thinking maybe it was a trick of the reflection, a shadow being cast strangely. But no matter how she adjusted it, the figure remained visible in the mirror while the direct view showed an empty cargo area. She thought about pulling over, calling the police, but what would she say? That she saw someone in her mirror but not when she looked directly? They'd think she was crazy, or drunk, or hallucinating. Instead, Sarah accelerated. I-10 stretched ahead, empty and dark. The next town with any substantial population was Columbus, still 30 miles away. She pushed her van faster, wanting desperately to reach lights, people, safety. The temperature in the van started dropping. Sarah cranked up the heat, but the cold persisted. It seemed to be coming from behind her, from the cargo area. Her breath started forming visible clouds despite the heater running full blast. She couldn't help herself. She kept glancing at the rearview mirror. The figure was still there, but it had moved. It was closer now, as if it had shifted forward among the packages. Still blurred, still indistinct, but definitely closer to the partition that separated it from Sarah. Her podcast was still playing, but she couldn't focus on it anymore. All she could hear was her own breathing, and a sound she couldn't quite identify. A rustling maybe, or movement coming from behind her, but every time she looked directly back, the cargo area was empty. Then she heard it, a whisper, so faint she almost thought she'd imagined it. It seemed to be coming from right behind her, from the other side of the partition. She couldn't make out words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was angry, or not angry exactly, but aware that she knew it was there. Sarah started praying. She's not particularly religious, but in that moment she prayed to every god she could think of. Please let me reach Columbus. Please let there be a gas station open. Please let me not be alone with this thing. She saw lights ahead. Columbus, finally. She took the first exit she saw, pulled into a brightly lit truck stop, and didn't even properly park. She just stopped the van, jumped out, and ran into the convenience store. The clerk, a young guy probably working the night shift, looked at her with concern. "You okay, miss?" Sarah couldn't speak for a moment. She just stood there, breathing hard, looking back at her van through the store windows. Finally, she managed to ask if he could check inside her van, make sure there wasn't anyone in there. The clerk, probably used to weird requests from highway drivers, grabbed a flashlight and went outside with her. He opened the back of the van, shined the light inside. "Just packages, ma'am, nobody in here." Sarah made him check thoroughly, under every box, behind every stack. Nothing. The van was empty. The clerk asked if she wanted him to call the police, if she'd been threatened or followed. She said no, thanked him, and bought a large coffee she didn't want. She sat in the truck stop for over an hour, gathering her courage to continue. When she finally got back in the van, she drove with all the interior lights on, the radio turned up loud, windows cracked despite the cold. Anything to make her feel less isolated, less vulnerable. She didn't look in the rearview mirror once during the rest of the drive. She delivered her packages in Houston at dawn and immediately drove back to San Antonio. She told her supervisor she was sick and took 3 days off. During those days, Sarah researched online. She found dozens of similar accounts. Delivery drivers, truckers, people who drive alone at night, all reporting seeing figures in their mirrors that weren't there when they looked directly. Some called it the phantom passenger, an entity that appears in the vehicles of solitary night drivers. Sarah still works as a delivery driver, but she requested daytime routes only, and she removed the rearview mirror from her van entirely. If something's there, she'd rather not know. Now, speaking of unexplainable presences on highways, I need to share what happened to Officer James Rodriguez, a 38-year-old highway patrol officer in California. His experience on the I-5 between Sacramento and Redding shows that sometimes it's not the living who need help on our roads, but the dead who continue searching for something they never found in life. James has been a California highway patrol officer for 12 years. His job is to patrol the highways, help stranded drivers, manage accidents, and enforce traffic laws. It's work he does with professionalism and dedication. After 12 years, he thought he'd seen everything these roads had to offer. In October 2021, James was on night patrol on I-5. It was around midnight. Traffic was light. He was making his routine rounds, keeping an eye out for speeders or any vehicles that might need assistance. That's when he got the call. A motorist had reported a vehicle stopped on the shoulder with hazard lights on, around mile marker 543. James confirmed he'd check it out. He arrived at the location a few minutes later. Sure enough, there was a vehicle on the shoulder, an old Ford pickup from the 1990s, hazard lights blinking. James pulled up behind it, activated his own emergency lights, and approached. He could see someone sitting in the driver's seat, a figure sitting completely still. James tapped on the window. "Highway Patrol, you okay? Need any help?" The man in the driver's seat looked up. He was maybe in his 40s, looking tired and confused. He rolled down the window. I don't know where I am," he said. "I was driving to Redding and suddenly I'm here. I don't remember stopping." James noticed the man seemed disoriented, possibly in shock. He asked if the man had been in an accident, if he was feeling ill. The man shook his head. "No, I was just driving, and then I'm here. How long has it been?" James asked for the man's license and registration. Robert Chen, address in Sacramento, valid driver's license. Everything seemed in order, but something was off. The registration sticker on the windshield was dated 2006, expired for 15 years. "Sir, your registration is expired," James said. Robert took the registration, looked at it confused. "That's not possible. I just renewed it last month, in September. September 2006. A chill ran through James. "Sir, it's 2021, October 2021. Robert looked at him like he was insane. "No, it's 2006. I was driving home from visiting my sister in Sacramento. That was yesterday. Or today. What day is it?" James started to understand that something very strange was happening. He asked Robert to step out of the vehicle, to come sit in the patrol car. Robert obeyed. seeming completely lost. In the patrol car, James showed Robert his phone, the date displayed. Robert went very pale. "This is impossible. I don't understand." James decided to check something. He entered Robert Chen's name into his computer connected to the state database. What he found made his blood run cold. Robert Chen, born 1962, deceased October 6, 2006. Traffic accident on I-5, mile marker 543. Cause of death, lost control of vehicle, collision with semi-truck. The accident report indicated Robert had fallen asleep at the wheel after driving for many hours without rest. James looked at the man sitting next to him. Robert was staring out the window, seeming to gradually realize something. "I remember now," he said quietly. "I was so tired. I'd been driving from Sacramento." I closed my eyes just for a second. And then nothing. Until now. "How long have I been gone?" Robert asked. James didn't know what to say. 15 years, he finally answered. Robert nodded slowly. 15 years, stuck on this highway, driving over and over, trying to get home, but I never make it, do I? James didn't know how to handle this. Nothing in his training had prepared him for this. He called his supervisor, tried to explain what was happening, but words failed him. While he was talking to his supervisor, he turned back to Robert. The passenger seat was empty. Robert had vanished. James jumped out of the car, looked around. The old Ford pickup was still there on the shoulder. James approached it. The truck was empty now, doors unlocked. Inside, everything was frozen in time. The dashboard showed technology from 15 years ago. On the passenger seat was a receipt dated October 2006. James called for a tow truck. When it arrived, the driver was unsurprised. "This truck? This is the third or fourth time I've been called to pick it up from this exact spot. It keeps reappearing. We tow it, impound it, and a few weeks later, it's back here." James did research after that night. He discovered that several officers over the years had encountered Robert Chen on this section of highway, always at the same spot, always confused, always believing it's 2006. Every time they try to help him, he disappears. James's theory is that Robert is trapped in a loop, replaying his last drive over and over. Every time he stops, every time someone tries to help, the loop resets. He's condemned to drive this section of highway forever, searching for a home he'll never reach. James continues to patrol I-5, but now he's careful around that specific section. And sometimes, late at night, he sees the old Ford pickup on the shoulder. He doesn't stop anymore. He's learned that there are things on our highways we can't help. Souls trapped in their final moments, condemned to repeat their tragedy again and again. And to close out these unsettling highway accounts, I want to share the story of Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a 52-year-old physician who frequently drives between Seattle and Portland for medical conferences. Her experience on I-5 in Washington State involves something she never believed possible until she lived it: a time loop on a modern highway where the same miles repeat over and over without logical explanation. Elizabeth has been a practicing physician for 25 years, specializing in emergency medicine. Her work occasionally requires travel between Seattle and Portland, a drive she's made countless times. I-5 between these cities is a well-maintained interstate, heavily traveled, with excellent signage and services. In March 2022, Elizabeth was driving back to Seattle after a conference in Portland. She'd left around 7 p.m., expecting to arrive home around 10:30 or 11. The highway was moderately busy for a Wednesday evening. Normal conditions, clear weather. Everything was routine until she passed Joint Base Lewis-McChord, roughly halfway between the two cities. Elizabeth noticed a mileage sign indicating 75 miles to Seattle. Nothing unusual. That was the correct distance from that point. She continued driving, listening to an audiobook, relaxed but focused. After what she estimated was about 15 minutes, she saw another mileage sign. She expected it to say something like 65 or 60 miles to Seattle, but the sign said 75 miles. Elizabeth frowned. She must have misread it.
Maybe it said 175 and she'd confused the numbers in the growing darkness. She kept driving, now paying more attention to the mileage markers. 10 minutes later, another sign. 75 miles to Seattle. Exactly the same. Impossible. Elizabeth started feeling confused. She checked her speedometer. She was driving about 65 miles per hour, the normal speed. Her odometer showed she'd traveled distance, but according to the highway signs, she wasn't getting any closer to Seattle. She decided to pay attention to other landmarks. There was a distinctive rest area she remembered passing with a modern building and a tall cell tower. Surely that wouldn't appear twice. But 15 minutes later, there it was. The same rest area with the same design on the same side of the highway. Elizabeth started to panic. This made no sense. She decided to exit at the rest area, maybe rest, maybe ask for help, do something to break whatever was happening. She pulled off into the rest area, parked in the main lot. There were a few other vehicles there. The building was lit. Everything looked normal. She got out, breathing deeply, trying to calm herself. When she entered the building, there was an attendant at the information desk. Elizabeth asked where exactly they were, what mile marker. The attendant looked confused by the question, but told her they were at mile 75, approximately. Elizabeth tried to explain what she was experiencing, that she'd passed the same point multiple times. The attendant looked at her with concern, asking if she was feeling all right, if she needed medical attention. Elizabeth realized she probably thought she was having some kind of medical episode. She bought a coffee and went back outside. She decided to try something different. Instead of continuing north toward Seattle, she'd turn around and go south back toward Portland. Maybe that would break the loop. She got back on the highway, but heading south. She drove for 20 minutes, passing several signs showing decreasing distances to Portland. Everything seemed normal now. Maybe it had just been a strange episode, exhaustion, confusion. But then she decided to try heading north to Seattle again. She took the next exit, turned around, and got back on I-5 northbound. And almost immediately, she saw the sign. 75 miles to Seattle. Elizabeth started driving faster, pushing well above the speed limit, desperate to see those numbers change. But no matter how long she drove, how much time passed, the signs kept saying 75 miles. And periodically she'd see the same rest area, the same bridge, the same landmarks repeating in what seemed like an endless loop. Her car's gas gauge was going down. At least that was consistent with the time she'd been driving. Her phone showed that more than 2 hours had passed since she left Portland, but according to the highway, she'd made no progress. Elizabeth was close to tears, considering pulling over and calling the police, when suddenly something changed. She passed a sign that said 70 miles to Seattle. 5 miles of progress, then 65, then 60. The numbers started decreasing normally. Elizabeth kept driving, hardly daring to believe the loop had broken. But the signs continued showing decreasing distances. 45 miles, 30, 15. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she saw the lights of Seattle on the horizon. When she arrived at her home in Seattle, it was 2 in the morning. A drive that normally takes 3.5 hours had taken 7. She checked her car's GPS, which had been recording the entire time. The log showed something impossible. For over 3 hours, the GPS had tracked her at the same point on the highway, mile 75, even though she was certain she'd been in constant motion. Elizabeth researched whether there were other similar reports on that highway. On internet forums, she found a few testimonies from people describing similar experiences.
stretches of highway where they seemed to get stuck, driving without actually progressing. Some attributed it to highway hypnosis or fatigue. Others suggested more paranormal explanations, temporal or spatial anomalies. One user on a forum mentioned that the specific stretch of I-5 where Elizabeth experienced the loop had been built over an old Native American trail, and before that, according to local legends, it was an area where travelers reported getting mysteriously lost, finding themselves walking in circles without being able to make progress. Elizabeth has never experienced that loop again, though she still uses I-5 regularly. But now she's extremely conscious of the mileage signs, always verifying that the numbers are decreasing correctly. And she keeps a detailed log of landmarks on her phone to make sure she's not passing the same places twice. She told me that the experience changed her perspective on reality. We take for granted that highways work logically, that space and time are predictable constants. But that night, she learned that maybe there are cracks in our reality, places where the normal rules don't apply, where you can drive for hours without getting anywhere, trapped in a loop that defies all rational explanation.